Hi, Tim Busfield here. I was just on Really Famous. Kara is a fantastic interview. She's super smart. She got me to say things I really shouldn't have said, but I feel really comfortable with her because she's so great. She's like therapist smart. She must have been a therapist before, and she really understands where we come from as people. I was really honored to be a part of her show. Thank you, Kara.
This is Really Famous. I'm Kara Mayer Robinson, and I interview famous people. But I don't just interview them like your typical interview. I'm not really interested in those same old questions. Instead, I like to know who they really are and what they really think. My really famous guest this week is Timothy Busfield. So who is Timothy Busfield? So many people. If you watch Designated Survivor, Wednesday nights on ABC, he plays Dr. Loudon, Kiefer Sutherland's trusted therapist. If you watched The West Wing, he played Danny Concannon, a journalist who had a lot of scenes with Allison Janney. I won't give away more than that. And if you watched one of my personal favorites, 30-something, he is Elliot Weston. He was in so many other things: Field of Dreams, Secrets and Lies, Revenge of the Nerds, Family Ties, and Trapper John, MD. Plus, he is a director, big time. He directs so many television series now. He even directed a pivotal episode of This Is Us. You know that show, I think. Also Nashville, Damages, Ed. And this interview was fun, and it became like a masterclass about acting and directing. He knows so much, and he's worked with so many people. He breaks down Tom Hanks' performance in Castaway, Aaron Sorkin's brilliance, Steven Spielberg, Glenn Close. Yeah, it's a really cool conversation about television and film. Plus, there are a few touches of very personal things because that's how I roll, as you know by now. Factoid: Tim is married to Melissa Gilbert. Yes, that Melissa Gilbert, Little House on the Prairie. He's also very involved in the theater, and he's an artist in residence at Michigan State University. He is big on bringing theater and the arts to children. So if there's any kind of opera or theater or dance coming to a theater or a school near you, go out and see it. Support it financially. Do whatever you can. That would make Tim very happy. So Tim and I hung out at the Ryu Plaza, New York, Times Square. Thank you, Ryu, for being so hospitable and accommodating. It was fun. The two of us sat down, chatted it up, and then afterwards we took some fun photos in the foyer, and it was kind of funny, actually. A lot of them were blurry, but if you want to see them, you can check it out on reallyfamouspodcast.com or by clicking on the episode notes. And film lovers, do you like Star Wars? Did you ever wonder where it was filmed? Well, part of it was filmed in Death Valley. And if you'd like to check it out, you'll appreciate this message from our new sponsor. The Oasis in Death Valley offers a true American oasis with lush gardens and spring-fed swimming pools. 2 properties are available: the recently renovated 4 Diamond Inn at Death Valley and the family-friendly Ranch at Death Valley. To celebrate May the 4th, the property is featuring an unofficial tour of Star Wars filming locations in Death Valley, plus 2 nights accommodations at the ranch and a $50 food credit throughout May. Visit oasisatdeathvalley.com/offers for details. I give you Timothy Busfield.
I live in Michigan, we live here. We have a place here and we have a place in Michigan.
Okay, so when you say here, you mean New York, because we're in New
York.
York right now.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of home to you a little bit?
It's always been my favorite place. I want to die here, I really do. I'm like, roll up the wagon, get Mr. Busfield out of 7A, bring his wife a bagel, no tomatoes.
Bagel with cream cheese, no tomatoes?
That's it. She said with menopause came that she can't eat tomatoes anymore.
Really?
Red wine and tomatoes, yeah, she breaks out like she has a peanut allergy. She can't do it.
Oh, that's so
devastating
weird.
for her. No, she loves tomatoes.
And your wife is Melissa Gilbert.
Yes.
Which is super cool.
Yeah, it's cool. She's super cool.
Everybody, of course, will remember from Little House on the Prairie.
Sure.
So you've been married how long?
5 years.
So you're newlyweds.
And it'll be in about 8 days will be our 5th year. Yeah, we've been together about 6 years, and newlyweds for the most part. But I think I've been married, and she's probably close 30 years to 3 different women. So
wait, you've been married to 3 different women
for 3 years, and she's been married to 3 men, and I would say probably for close to 30 years.
So you both have that experience under your belt.
Yeah.
And that makes you highly compatible, I guess?
I think we have fun. At this point, the kids were empty nesters, so who can't have fun when you're empty nesters? Sleep till whenever, do whatever. It's all really fun.
How old are your kids?
My oldest is 36 yesterday, and my middle is 29, and my youngest is 27 in July. And her kids are, she has 2 with Boxleitner who were stepkids.
You say Boxleitner,
Bruce Boxleitner, sorry. I have to call him the shorthand. Bruce Boxleitner was her last husband. And one with Bo Brinkman, who was her first husband, who we just got married, and that's Dakota, and Dakota's 29. So we have 22, 29. We both are right in the same ballpark. The youngest is 22, and then a couple of stepkids, Sam Boxleitner and Lee Boxleitner, who are hers, and she treats them like hers, and they think of her as a mom. So we include them in the 7 we have together.
That is so cool. That's like a big...
It's great.
Like
we just
a
had
big
a
bunch.
wedding. Oh, it's fun. We just had a wedding for Dakota in Austin, and his wife Marissa, and there was we got a big house. Melissa got a big Airbnb, and we all were in there, and I was making margaritas all, every day, and it was just a big party. And little Lulabelle, her granddaughter, through Sam Boxleitner, is Papa Tim, and she thinks of me as a grandpa, and I just became a real grandpa day before yesterday. My daughter Daisy in California gave birth to Ruby Jennings Ackerman, and that's my daughter's husband.
Congratulations.
And, Greg Ackerman. Yeah, it's really. I was the guy. I would look at pictures of people showing pictures of their kids, and I'd be like, a grandkid. Look at my grandkid. Oh yeah, it's cute. That's cute. And I'd think, people shouldn't really just be so forthright, just jamming their pictures in people's faces. And I'm the worst. I'm like, look at that face. Look at that face. It's perfect. Look at my granddaughter. It's great.
Where is she? I'm not seeing her picture.
On my phone. I turned my phone off.
All right, you'll have to show me later.
For the podcast here. I'll show you.
I'm sure
now,
she's
but go ahead.
adorable.
We can
So
talk.
she's that new?
Yeah, she's
Was that kind of like a profound change for you, or because you had these other sort of grandchildren, it was something you're used to?
The other one was just only Lulabelle was the only one who sort of was, and that was recently at the wedding. So she always liked me, and little kids, I've always got, been really good with kids, entertaining them, and was great with my kids, was a hands-on dad, and I would get up in the middle of the night and bounce them and put them back to sleep and feed them and take care of them, and they knew me for that, being a hands-on dad. So being a grandpa, I just can't wait. I get to go. My daughter she just got home. I'll go Friday to California.
So what was the most difficult time period in childhood as a parent when you look back at your kids?
Wow. Well, it wasn't the earlier period. The earlier periods are fatigue. I mean, that was difficult because I'd had a child from a previous marriage, and my ex struggled a little bit, finding herself, which is natural. You've got 2 kids 2 years apart in the first 5 years, but we also had another one that ended up living with us when he was 11, my oldest. And I had a little bit of a head start. So, getting up in the middle of the night and putting the kid back down, and the delicacy of transition from kid asleep on your shoulder to staying asleep on the bed, I feel as though I was a master of that. So that's the hardest thing to kind of learn, is how to manage your sleep and your life when you're going, wait a minute, they told me I'd be tired, but this is tough. The hardest part, I think, is separating from your being a parent when they're in their teen years and actually being someone who loves them and their friend, which you want to be, and their parent, and to be able to actually say, no, you need to do your homework, and you're not going to bring me into therapy for that. You need to make sure that, you might have hurt that person's feelings by acting that way, and what did you learn from that, versus anybody's wrong that hurts my kid. anybody who's wrong that slights my kid. You have to mature above that and make sure that your kids have something they can adapt to, I believe, as adults, and say, no, the better behavior is not to cut somebody off, but to talk it out. Not to not speak to anybody anymore, but to actually find a way to talk to them. And the hardest part about parenting is making that stuff, because they're big. And they'll say, don't tell me how to be, and you don't know, and you're no expert, and they say these things to you. And that's the most difficult part, is when they're old enough to actually, they've gone through puberty. The teen years I find the most difficult, because they're also pushing you, or pushing themselves out of the nest. That's natural. They know they need to move on. And that doesn't often happen if they're incredibly comfortable at home, and you're incredibly comfortable having them at home. Then it's difficult for them to get up and go. So they kind of hate you from 16, 17, 18 as they prepare to leave the nest. And if you can't handle that, and you want to give into that and give them everything they want, then that's when it becomes really difficult. It's more philosophical, I think, than at that point, because up till then they've been dependent on you. So very, very, I think that's the hard part, and dealing with them not liking you. Plus, their mom and I broke up. Daisy and Sam's mom and I broke up when they were 16 and 18. And the 18-year-old had college and a boyfriend who's now the one that has the baby. But the 16-year-old was kind of left behind. And to hear all that, and that was very difficult, because they naturally had to side with mom. And it was just kind of difficult to, have to wait that out. And you can't say anything bad about her, because it's a sacred relationship. So it becomes very difficult in how to process that time, how to manage that time, because if you say things bad about the mom, it's going to come back on you, because they ultimately have to have a healthy relationship with her when she dies. You don't want stuff in between her. You have to build a baseball field out in the middle of a cornfield like Kevin Costner did to make sure your dad comes back, so you can say, let's have a catch.
Yeah, a nice reference to Field of Dreams, which you were in. But I don't want to get off topic too soon onto that. So you are a very philosophical person. Like, you've thought about all of this quite a bit, it seems like.
Well, I've experienced it more than I've thought about it. You have to think about it. But as you experience it,
you don't just experience it and just move on. It sounds like when you were experiencing it, you were also analyzing it.
I was a child of divorce as well, and I grew up with a dad and my stepmother, I was no longer allowed to really live with them. I moved with my dad to Arkansas, and my dad, the stepmother, I wasn't hers, and there was always that distance, because I wasn't hers, even though I don't really remember my life without her as my stepmom.
Wait, so your parents got divorced, and then you went with your dad?
I stayed with my mom until I was 16, and then I moved with my dad to Arkansas. And my dad had moved from Michigan to Arkansas, and I had a stepmom since I was 7. And I really didn't remember my life before my stepmom, but I was not hers. And there was always that sort of petty resentment towards me, or maybe it was just that I was a pill and difficult as a child. But I saw my dad choose the stepmom over the kid, and then I wasn't allowed to live with them, and my dad said, you got to move, and so I moved out. And at that point, I think you kind of say, I'm going to be a better dad than my mom, or I'm a better dad than my dad. And although he never said anything bad about my mom, and my mom never ever said anything bad about my dad, they really honored us. It sort of made me want to be a better dad and say I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to choose a spouse over a child. And I was going to make sure I helped that relationship, nurtured that relationship.
Now, were there other kids? Did your stepmother?
There was one younger than me, a half-sister, Julia, who's a lawyer in Arkansas, and I'm, her big brother. And then I have an older sister, Terry, who's 8 years older than me, and then brother Buck, who's 5 years older than me, and we're all very close.
And Terry and Buck are your
100%, full brother and sister.
And so so they were already done, I guess, by the time that you wanted to move and live with.
Oh, they were gone. I mean, when I was 13, they were gone. There was just me in the house and my stepfather and, my mom's bottle of vodka.
Okay, that was going to be my question, was where was mom?
Mom was a woman from Texas, a preacher's daughter, born in the 20s, made it through the 50s, divorced in the 50s when people didn't necessarily get divorced in 59. Single parent, worked at Michigan State University. Alcohol problem, maybe about 20 times in the hospital to dry out. The last time I took her to Betty Ford in 96, I think when she was living in Santa Barbara. And she seemed to kind of handle it pretty much after that. Great, fun, sweet lady, loved me to death. Just had demons, you know, with alcohol.
So did you know when you were little even that there was the alcohol effect was going on?
I didn't understand not till I was a teenager. Actually, I had a friend over, and he woke me up and said, "You spend the night," and he said, "Hey, you know, Bus, your mom's just, I think, fell down the stairs. You got to go get her." And so, you know, I went down, and she was on the bottom of the steps, and she sort of hit her head on the wall, and she was seeing things. She was seeing snakes. She was seeing alligators. She was freaking out, and she was on a medication and not allowed to drink and was going through DTs. And that was the first time that I was aware of that problem, and I called my dad. I called the doctor, and the doctor said, "How dare you call me in the morning like this?" And I was like, I'm sorry, I was 15, something like that. That's when I became, you know, completely aware of it. Plus, that's in Michigan, when I was 15, the drinking age was 18, so I was drinking. Like 21-year-olds start drinking at 18.
Was there mental illness as well? Was she on medication for some sort of mental illness?
No, she was sharp. She was an editor. She ended up running this press. She didn't have, I don't think, she might have had some history in mental illness, but I didn't see that, and she didn't seem to have it. She was really a really cool lady and a fun lady and supportive and loving, and made me believe I could do anything, and really encouraged me in a lot of ways. And I don't think that I would have had the life and the career I'd had if it wasn't for her support. I didn't get that from my dad, oddly enough, who was a PhD in theater and taught at Michigan State, but then left the theater behind. And he was not real supportive, you know, felt like I needed to be a lawyer or a doctor. And I was saying, my grades are terrible. I don't like to read. I want to be an actor. And he had said I don't have the talent to be an actor. My brother had all the talent. And whereas my mom was saying, I believe you can do anything if you put your mind to it. You know, I believe in you. And that was really supportive.
So you had this like dichotomy with your mom that, like, you know, she had an alcohol problem, but at the same time she's super supportive and giving you like the emotional stability and encouragement that you need.
Well, we had to work through it. You know, going back to what you said about the philosophical thing as being a parent, we worked through it, and I was aware. I mean, it was probably 31 when I finally said to my mom, here's the choice, Mom. We can be friends from here on out, but I'm no longer can be your boy. You can't badmouth my kid's mom. You can't play guilt trips. You have got to detach as a parent if you can, and think of me as a friend and somebody close, and I'll spend more time with you. And she was relieved at that. And from there on out, we never had any problem. From there on out, forever and ever, we were always really close and really thick, and we sort of defined a better relationship as an adult, you know, mother, son versus, you know, adolescent.
That's communication will do that every time.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds as though all of your challenges as a child actually were gifts in a way, because you became this kind of person, although you probably already were to some degree this kind of person who thought about things, observed, made decisions, figured out what you want to do going forward, right? You're probably kind of always like that, but then this brought it out in you even more.
I think I became more that way. I think I matured that way. I think that there was the only thing that I know from that might have been there. My behavior was a sort of joy for life. I wasn't a dark, brooding kid. I was a playful kid that always seemed like fun was out there. But then as the sufferings of adulthood weigh in, as relationships and marriage and children weigh in, I think I became more philosophical because of my childhood. I remember at 14, lifting a kid out of a stroller, and it may have been my nephew or whoever, I can't remember, But I knew in that moment when I lifted that child up and put that child on my shoulder, I wanted to be a dad, and I wanted to be a young dad, that I wasn't going to wait long, and that I could feel it wasn't long. And it was within 10 years, of 24, I had my first kid, and I just knew that's what I wanted to do. And so philosophy on parenting really kind of came into play. And the thing with my dad was, affected me a lot with my stepmom and why she was the way she was. And I guess I had a bit of that then.
Did you doubt yourself a little bit because of the way that she and he were treating you?
Her way was so heinously wrong.
Well, what was it?
Oh, it's just her. I mean, she had she was plagued by a lot of mental disorders. I mean, and she died fairly young. Look, on her deathbed, she was calling my name on her deathbed because of how she treated me. And my little sister struggled with looking at ordinary people because she looked a little like Mary Tyler Moore, and the way she treated the Tim Hutton character, my little sister couldn't see it. I loved her because I was her stepkid. I wanted her approval. But she had her own demons, and I ultimately realized that. And I realized, I think, by the time I was 19 and was able to love her back. And at 20, when we'd get together, I realized I could do the loving on my end. And then when you get kids, it's like, look, I know you hate me, but I'll love you enough for both of us. And which doesn't necessarily make them, they get mad when they hear it, but it's the truth. I'm not going to ask that my kids make me okay. And you kind of learn that, if you have a relationship that's dysfunctional, I think.
So have you been in therapy?
I've never been I play a therapist on Designated Survivor.
I know you do.
I've never been a therapist, and I haven't spent a lot of time with therapists, but, I have done researched Eastern philosophies and philosophy, and I'm an actor, right? So, and a director. So how can I pull performances out from, all we have to share is our suffering, I believe, as artists. It's always usually about a better way to illustrate suffering and conquest of suffering.
So do you think better actors know how to be in touch with their suffering and themselves more?
Without a doubt. I think the best actors absolutely know how to do that, and they want to share it, and they bring you in through it. And a lot of our great actors, we sort of, especially, Laurence Olivier was Laurence Olivier, he's an actor. But Harrison Ford is a great actor. He knows exactly what he's doing and when he's going to bring you into that. And he's a great leading man because the audience can trust that there'll be a point where he could go the wrong way or the right way, or a way and then another way, and it's going to be paced, and he's going to take you with him. Meryl Streep will bring you with her. Tom Hanks will bring you with them. That's why they're such great leads, is because they usually share that suffering, and they share that moment where they have to be mature and step up and be brave.
So do they plan that, do you think?
Of
the
course.
Pacing of it?
I think they see it and they aim for it and they know they have it. Castaway is a great example of at what point do you quit in this process? Nobody's going to find you. You'll never be discovered. How far do you go? Where's the moment when he loses the soccer ball? Where's the moment come? And then to come back to the woman you loved and see that when is the moment when you realize that you have to let her have her life, and that all you wanted was her, and then you lose her and you have to give her back to her husband. Those are the moments the actors are aiming for.
So you think Tom Hanks, for example, read the whole script because there wasn't much dialogue when he was out there with Wilson, but then at a certain point that was it. It was when Wilson was missing.
Yeah, I think.
So do you think he read that and decided on his own, there was no discussion or whatever, that this to me feels like the pivotal emotional moment?
I think he's one of the smartest. I think he's one of the smartest men in our business. There's no doubt about it, and there's no doubt that Tom sees that, and every really great leading man sees that. They know where that moment is, and they earn those turns. And everything, I guarantee you, that he was doing from square one was to turn that moment where he loses Wilson, and then again that moment where he loses the girl, and then how do you triumph over that? And you aim for those. You set those up. You earn those turns, because those are the moments the audience is completely with the movie or with the story.
I'm with it even now when you're describing it. I am.
That's what good storytelling is, and I don't think there's any better storyteller, actor storyteller or producer storyteller out there than Tom Hanks. And I think he's seen that in every movie from Big, Splash. I think he's seen it, that turning point. I think he knew that early on. And he's smart.
Mm-hmm. So do you go to the movies a lot? Do you watch things at home?
We go to the movies all the time, and now that movies have recliners in them where you can they have barca loungers in them, we go all the time. We go to either Kips Bay or we go to the 84th Street theaters, which is up by where we live, and we'll take a blanket in and we'll take a burger in, or we'll find a sandwich, get the classic, ham on sourdough with butter, the French sandwich. My wife and I, Melissa Gilbert, we love to go to the movies, or we'll see them on TV, or we'll watch them at night. And she loves action. She's not like a chick flick, only.
So she likes all the superhero movies?
We see them all. She'll see superhero. She can go to sleep to The Exorcist. She can and I can't. I'm like, honey, I can't possibly go to sleep to this movie. This is a nightmare. This is horrifying.
So I have to tell you, I hate the recliners at the movies. Last time I went and there was the recliner, I was so uncomfortable. It was like I was getting like a kink in my neck. It was like pushed up too much. My legs are all up. I just didn't like it one bit. And then it's true that all around me, I feel like I'm sitting in a restaurant or something. It's like everyone's ringing. It's just like, they're ringing their sandwiches.
I can't get enough of it. We get in there, we kick our shoes off. We actually even went and bought a blanket. We went and saw a triple feature last weekend at Kips Bay Theaters down here in Manhattan. And we went to the first show, and then we went to the second show, and then we went to a little taqueria. And the theater was a little chilly, so we bought a little blanket at the Duane Reade drugstore, and we went in with a blanket, and there we were, cozy as could be, watching a movie, and our third movie of the day. We live for that, and that's what we do. We love what we do.
Yeah, clearly, if you're still going to all the movies, because so many people say at this point, oh, I just never get to the movies because it's all on Netflix.
We watch them. We watch stuff on Netflix, and we watch movies there as well. We binge watch TV shows.
What are your TV shows you've been binging on lately?
Well, we just watched, it's a documentary, but we just saw Ken Burns' Vietnam. We love Elizabeth Moss's show, The Handmaid's Tale. She was on The West Wing and played Martin Sheen's daughter on it. So I got to love her a little bit there, and as a teammate. My wife watches The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Everybody watches The Real Housewives.
She watches it, and I can't. Since Kim is not there, I can't. There's not a real nutball on the show. It's all manufactured.
Wait, Kim?
Kim and Kyle Richards.
Which one is this? Real Housewives of what?
Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I like that because she would be. You realize she wasn't manipulating the supposed reality TV, whereas now you can clearly tell that they've said, hey, why don't you guys argue about this? It all seems so manufactured. So to really pull those off, you absolutely have to have somebody who's a grade A kind of, nuthead going through it. I watched that. That will be on the reel of This Is On. We love Bill Maher. I love Bill Maher. That's something that we'll want to see, that we'll go back into HBO Go and see. We don't have a cable here in New York, so we work off of the internet. So we see what's on Netflix and Apple, and we binge watch.
So if you want something on network, like Designated Survivor, you get that on CBS On Demand or something?
Yeah, ABC On Demand, but we have to wait. That's okay. Sorry. Doesn't matter. They're all the same. CBS, ABC, NBC, they're all extremely similar. And because of standards and practices, they're all very much alike. There's certain words you can't say on all three of those networks. It's about binge watching.
Yeah.
And there's certain shows I can't watch without my wife, just like there's movies I can't watch without my wife. Well, if I can't, I couldn't start on Homeland is one of our next binges.
Oh, so you haven't seen it at all?
No. And you don't want to start on something that we haven't seen it, but it's sort of next up in The Americans. And I can't go on location and say I started The Americans without her going, well,
no, can't.
Now I have to go back and start. What episode are you on? Wait. I'll do the first two. Like if I'm out of town, I have to have permission to go to a movie because she'll say, okay, you can go see that, but then you have to see it again with me, even if you don't like it.
So Homeland, yeah, for sure, you got to do it together. I've been watching it with my husband all along too, but we've been watching it since the beginning. This season, it's like he can't seem to be around to catch up when I am with Homeland.
So are you jumping ahead?
Well, yeah, I did jump ahead, and I have to tell you, there were a few episodes that were a little and so it was okay to skip
That's
them.
divorce material right there.
Well,
I mean,
listen,
I got to bring
like
you up on charges for that.
Yeah, but it's like the
can't.
7th season or so. It's been 7 years, and we're not binging Homeland, you know what I'm saying? So I did bring him back up to speed. He's like, all right, I'll jump back in. He was ready to give up. So that's a little different.
That is.
He was ready to call it quits.
What about Game of Thrones?
I don't watch Game of Thrones. I gave it like 20 minutes.
That's
Couldn't do it.
All right,
Couldn't do it. I don't really do fantasy though.
We can't wait. I mean, it's agony waiting for it to come back.
I hear that. I just couldn't.
Love it. We
connect.
love Peter Dinklage in it. We love. But whatever it is, I can't get enough of Game of Thrones. I think it's just spectacular.
Well, I can't talk about Game of Thrones, but I can tell you the Americans, yes, yes, yes.
I love that. And Noah Emmerich has been a friend for a long, long time. Since I was doing A Few Good Men, I got to know Noah because of his relationship to Josh Malina and Aaron Sorkin. And I love Noah, and it's just a matter of digging in and watching that one.
Yeah, you're going to be glad you did, and it doesn't take long to get hooked, and there are no bad seasons.
I can't wait.
And this is the final season, and so far, yes.
All right, cool.
So definitely put that on your list for next time.
I'll do that.
Okay, so comedies of any kind do you watch or no? Because we're talking mostly about dramas.
Oh yeah. We watch. I love a good comedy. I watch the stuff that's out there. I find it a little repetitive these days. I feel like we're into a little bit. Everything is feeling the same.
Like what?
Well, I just feel like Judd Apatow who's absolutely brilliant and maybe one of the best ever. It feels like every trailer of every movie looks like a Judd Apatow comedy. I haven't quite seen the new form of comedy yet. I mean, it's the same guys from Saturday Night Live and sitcoms kind of doing the same two-star. Let's forget. The problem I have with comedies is let's forget story and let's concentrate only on funny bits. And comedies like Young Frankenstein or The Producers or some of my, those comedies, Tootsie, the cinema comedies that I love the most, that it's hard we don't see them as much. It's sort of the napalm of comedy choices. Here's a funny bit and we'll sacrifice. I mean, I love Seth Rogen and I love Franco. I love all those guys and their movies. Seth Rogen stuff, I'll go see everything he's in. But sometimes you think like they're all sort of the same. I think those mixes of comedy, drama are really important, and having actors that can get there. That has often been the struggle, is finding the actors who can actually create three-dimensional characters. I love actors so much, and I love seeing actors evolve and become more three-dimensional and show me that they can make me weigh myself against them as a person and bring the audience along in their journey.
So did you see that when you were on The West Wing? Because that was what, 7 seasons? 9 seasons?
7 seasons.
7 seasons.
Well, they were all actors that could do both. I mean, Aaron really likes, you have to be able to do both if you can work with Aaron. You don't see a lot of the more two-dimensional. I mean, you've got to have some range to play with Aaron. You've got to be able to do the comedy and the drama, and you have to have both. And Whitford and Marty Sheen and Richard Schiff and Allison, great, fantastic Allison Janney, like nobody can play at all. All of those, the actors we had on the show for the most part could play, the drama and the comedy, and moments apart. And that's the difficult get for a lot of the comic actors today.
And how about the dialogue?
Well, the dialogue's the best dialogue of any writer of our time. There's no doubt about it. I mean, and I've worked with a lot of great writers and I love them to death. But what Aaron does is he does not give stage directions. He doesn't say, he breaks down here, he wonders, have I made the biggest mistake in my life? He puts it into the writing. So if you say the lines the way they're written, he will make sure the emotion comes, because it comes when he writes it. I've been in the room with him on multiple shows where he's in writing and while he's feeling what he's writing, and he puts it in the dictation, in the periods, in the if there's, like with Aaron, you'll look and you'll have a speech and you'll go, oh my God, that's a sentence. Aaron is saying, don't stop, and then there will be one line at the end that's separate, and the tears will come. And if you just simply go bobbity 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 bop, and then there's a line that's so beautiful that you start to well. It's in the writing, like it's in Shakespeare's writing, like it's in Arthur Miller's writing, like it was in Tennessee Williams' writing. In today's world of television, we have a lot of stage directions. He walks in the room, he looks at his wife, he contemplates their marriage, his eyes and his heart well with emotion, and then the dialogue will be, I'm gonna get a coffee, you want one? And you're like, really? And the networks will say, no, it's great. I love that moment. And as a director, you're going, the actor can't play this moment. And the actor gets the set and they go, what is this crap? I can't possibly make that. The audience will never know that I'm welling over. How are they gonna know? Whereas Aaron puts it in the writing and he makes it clear what's going on in the combatant nature of a scene or the tumbliness of a scene, and then opening up the emotion. It's all in the writing. It's not in stage direction. And today we're in a crisis where the TV writers that we have tend to, on network TV, put it all into stage directions. And it's noticeable.
So how do you know that? I guess because you work on so many different shows, or are you always also analyzing them as you're watching them?
Well, it comes from, and if you come up in the theater and you work with some of these writers that are there, that are the most spectacular, that don't have the gimmicks of car chases and other things to make their stories told, you really have to depend on their dialogue. And if you've worked with them enough and seen that writing, and Aaron on Broadway, Aaron at my theater, Aaron writing Sports Night, directing Sports Night, The West Wings, I did Studio 60 as a producer.
Studio 60. What a bummer that didn't stick.
I know. That was a really good one. It was, it's hard to say what's meant to be and not meant to be, and I know that Aaron and I both feel that was one that kind of got away, and I was a producer on that show as well as I directed 6 and acted in just about every episode. And
I still don't understand what happened, because that seemed to me like a great show.
I think there's a lot of pressure when producers come back after a classic. It's very difficult for a writer to come back in the front door with another classic when people are going to gauge you against The West Wing. They look at, and they, Aaron's got range as a writer. So to write what is arguably maybe one of the top 5 TV shows of all time, certainly in awards and success with The West Wing, and then to come back in with another show, it's difficult. The standard's very high, and what people are wanting it to be is very high. And I think we also learned, in the old days, back in the old days, shows might get a shot. They might get a second season. They weren't yanked in 6 or yanked in 12 very often. Nowadays, they're much more impatient. Studio 60, had it had a second season, would have absolutely improved, as I believe we improved on the back order. I believe we got better. And I think Aaron would have found out where he wants to put the ball, who he wants to carry the ball. When you put a show together, it's very difficult to know what actors in the pilot. On the really good shows, the pilot's the worst episode. Mm-hmm. On the really bad shows, the pilot's the best episode. Everybody picked up the pilot and then you never got back to that. Aaron's a guy, when you look at the pilot of West Wing, it's fantastic. It's a great episode of TV. It doesn't compare with some of the stuff in season 2 or season 3 or season 4. Aaron really figured out, and Tommy Schlamme, who really ran the show, Tommy figured out where their strengths were and where the show could improve and where it wanted to be better, and that you need time. Just like any place else, you need time to do that.
Let's go to 30-something. I loved it, and I was in college when it was on, and I remember I had a roommate who was like, why are you watching this show about people in their 30s? I was like, this is the greatest show ever. Like, I'm crying, I'm like excited, whatever it is. I could not wait for 30-something, because it was just, even though I wasn't in that stage of life, it hit home?
It was a great script. I remember reading the script. Yeah, it all comes down to the writing, really. If we're in a literary medium, these are literary mediums. They're not visual mediums. Film is not a visual medium. It's a literary. We're shooting a text. Unless it's an improv, even then it's literature in one way or another. But it's all driven by a script and a story.
So 30-something.
30-something was. The pilot was a great script. I remember reading it and thinking, oh my God, I said I don't want to do TV. I'd come off a show called Trapper John MD and had a great experience. And then I was saying I'll just, learned a lot more about film, and I have The Revenge of the Nerds 2 coming, and I think I'll just maybe go back to movies and plays. And it started a theater in Northern California at that time, and said I'll just do this. And then I got that 30-something script, and I was 29 at the time, and I said I got to grow a beard and I got to look older, and auditioned for my part and Peter Horton's part.
Gary.
And they said, which one do you want to play? And they
really?
sort of said, do you want to? And I said, I don't know anything about being the sexy single guy, but I can ruin a marriage. So let me play that guy.
Elliot Weston.
Elliot Weston. There came Elliot Weston. Great experience. Again, great filmmakers. You look at Aaron Sorkin, you look at the guys that created great shows, whether it's James L. Brooks, who we all kind of grew up on a little bit between The Simpsons and Mary Tyler Moore and shows like that. These guys had in their pocket throughout the show, they did Glory while we were shooting. They had Legends of the Fall. They had Shakespeare in Love. They had Courage Under Fire. These are all movies that they had ready to go when 30-something ended while we were doing the show. So they were fantastic filmmakers that were sort of biding their time and gracing television with their effort, and they happened to be on fire. What's great about 30-something is that the two main writers, Zwick and Herskovitz, the creators, wrote the shows with their wives. And they would record their fights and record their life and then share all of that suffering with the audience. And people would say, I feel like you're eavesdropping into my life. You're looking through, the window into my life, into how I behave. And it was really just the truth. They were writing and exploiting and then presenting the world with their crap. Their weaknesses.
And the world loves their crap.
They related.
Yeah.
And the audience related. And that's kind of what they want. If you're not a procedural show, which I've done a lot of those as well, if you're a show that's going to go for truth, for realistic, the audience has got to relate.
In the show, you're married to
Patricia Wedig.
Nancy, right?
Nancy,
who's Patricia Wedig, who in real life is married to Ken Olin, who played Michael Stedman.
Yeah.
So was that a little weird?
It was awkward for Kenny, and I didn't let it off the hook. He knew I would be in bed with his wife in the morning, and then I'd come to work with him in the afternoon, and I would rub it in his face because that was Elliot with Michael. Elliot was, come on, Mikey, and Kenny's character would, was the centerpiece, and he would carry the weight, and he was played things much more down. I don't know, Michael. Elliot. I'm lost, or he'd suffer, and his suffering was on his sleeve. And so the rhythm that we had and the chemistry we had, and we've been friends in New York. We've been friends. I knew Patty. I knew these guys. And I just would, if he went low, I went high and speedy. So he might go, yeah, my life really sucks. I'm like, come on, Mikey. And so
that wasn't script.
That was they wrote
you.
that. That was me and the script, and I was allowed on that show to really I was given carte blanche to change, and Ken would say, we'd go to the script supervisor, Ken Gilbert, and I'd say, why doesn't he say half of the speech and I'll say this part of the speech, and it'll look more like we're coming up with something together, and Ed Marshall okayed it with us. It was great though, and that show was we were not liked at all by the Television Critics Association. The very first one we did, they hated us.
Why?
Because we weren't Murder, She Wrote. They said you're a soap in prime time, and we don't want that. We don't want soaps in prime time. Then of course a year later they're like, well, we love you, welcome back. It was that kind of thing. But it forced us into being much more. It forced us into trusting and loving each other and pushing a lot of the public opinion away. we decided that, and it was really healthy for our show, they forced all of us into a corner, and what we had was each other.
So you bonded.
And we bonded, and we protected each other, and we sort of had, and we would talk about it. Let's ignore all the hoopla, let's ignore the signage, let's ignore the phenomenon of the show, and just focus on being pros and showing up and getting along and doing a good job.
The whole thing with Nancy and Gary, I mean, it's so old, it's really not, I don't need to say spoiler alert, I guess, right? Everybody's seen it. But to me, that was one of these moments that I will never forget in TV. When Nancy's in the hospital, everybody's in the hospital because Nancy, can I just say it?
Is her getting her second look? Yeah, go ahead.
So she has cancer, but she had treatment, it was successful, and
the episode was called Second Look.
Second Look.
And what happens in Second Look is Nancy, who has ovarian cancer, goes back in, and Patricia Heaton tells us that she's good to go. She's all clear. And everybody's there hoping, because do we have to go back? And I remember on that day that I said to Ken Olin, who directed the episode, I won an Emmy for the episode, and I said to Kenny, can we do this just once? I'll have one really good take. So can we make sure everything's lined up? So we do. I don't want to do this twice. I don't want to loop it. So if there's anything going on technically, let's cut. And he said, absolutely, and we went and did it. And then he said, Timmy, we got to go again. And I said, no problem. And then we shot that scene, and then Kenny had the scene where he has to hear from Peter Horton on the payphone. And I was done after that scene. Now it was going to be Ken hearing that Peter was dead in a car accident where he's on the payphone, and he asked me to watch him for that. And so, I was now, behind the camera watching his performance where he didn't want to go again. And we knew we were playing high stakes, heavy duty stuff, and that episode.
So you kind of stepped in into his role because he was acting.
I protected him. He was acting, and I stepped in as the director, and I was already a director on the show. But I was there to help him, to supervise him, and creating that kind of music. The ensemble of actors is very much similar, I would think, to any kind of band playing music. We very much trusted each other and leaned on each other, and there was really no animosity, or we were a great team, and we made sure that came first, and that we loved each other, and we still love each other.
That is so cool. Whatever you and Ken did that day to make it work, you did, it worked.
Well, it was the script too. It was incredibly.
Whatever everybody did.
Yeah.
Obviously, everybody had a hand in it. Also, I just read the factoid that Peter Horton was married to Michelle Pfeiffer. Is that true?
Sure, when we started.
That's so weird.
Yeah, I remember going to get. Yeah, that they were. I think they were separated. Maybe they were together in the pilot, and then I think between the pilot and I think that's when they kind of.
And then so I guess all of you kind of went on to direct too. More, you were already directing, but right?
I was not. I hadn't directed film and TV. I directed some plays, and I had a very successful theater for children that was up and running for a few years in Sacramento. Peter came in as a director, and when Peter directed, he opened the door for all the actors. And Ed and Marshall, their philosophy was really they didn't want a lot of TV directors directing our show. I think MGM made them hire a couple or a few, but for the most part they wanted theater people, and they wanted directors with no bad habits versus TV directors that were used to cranking out 10 episodes of TV a year of procedural shows. They wanted directors that were going to adjust to their style or bring something fresh and not have a lot of bad habits. And so we all got to play, and some young theater directors like Ron Lagomarsino, and he got to direct on the show and become one of our pivotal directors, and he was pretty much a theater director. So we encouraged that, they encouraged that, and we were all very fortunate. So that's where I first started directing on film.
How did you like the character of Elliot? I know you've been asked this a million times.
I really haven't been asked very much, and I don't do as much press as I did once in my time, or interviews. So I don't really talk about it that much. But I loved Elliot. I loved that I had a comic end and a tragic end on the show, and I loved that in the most artistic experience I've ever had in all my years was 30-something, because I could kind of say to the guys, here's where we're messed up. Here's where we make mistakes. And really, it was for the men that I played, Elliot, to say, here's where we're idiots. And men would say to me, dude, you're blowing my rap. You're making it hard for me to get away with stuff. And I love playing a guy. And there was an episode called Separation early on, and we shot it. And Peter Horton, we were prepping it, Peter Horton was directing. And Ed Marshall, they called me to their office, and I went to their office, and Horton was there, and they talked about, what would your arc be on the series if it was like 4 years? Which they already knew it was going to go 4 years. That was their contract, and there was no way the show was going to last a day past the 4th year. They made sure of that. And despite we were...
Wait, what do you mean they made sure of that?
Well, we were a huge moneymaker for ABC. We were the second highest moneymaker after Roseanne. MGM wanted us and needed us, but they didn't want the show to go without them. They didn't want the show... They had a chance to make a show that could live on as a great show. Moonlighting had been a great show under Glenn Gordon Caron for 3 years. And then they got rid of Glenn Gordon Caron, and the show was not the same show in the 4th year. Although Chick Egley and Channing Gibson, those guys were really good writers, they didn't have Glenn Gordon Caron's touch for what Bruce and Sybil were doing. And the show lost. It was no longer considered one of the all-time greats. And Ed Marshall didn't want that. They wanted it to go out on top. And they wanted to leave a show in that fashion rather than just let it keep going, and new producers and new writers and have people say, I really love the first 4 seasons. And so they designed it. So their arcs were built. And even in a holdout year, I was holding out, and they said, your contract can get reduced with ours. And I was like, that doesn't mean anything. You're leaving. The show's going to get canceled after 4, but okay.
Wait, did it get canceled after 4?
Yeah, it got canceled.
So it was
after
only 4 seasons or so?
4 seasons.
Too short.
But they wanted that arc, and I said, what, we're going to split you and Nancy up. And they said, where would you go? And I said, well, I'd love to, play a guy who looks for something in single life that doesn't exist, that leaves his wife thinking that something exists in the single world that's going to fulfill him, only to realize that everything he had, like Wizard of Oz, was in his own backyard. He had the wife and the children. He had everything to grow with. And then maybe a spiritual change, later that he has as he matures. And they wrote every bit of that to a T.
So that was your idea?
It might have been where they were headed anyway, but I was able to contribute and voice that. And I was able to contribute and voice throughout that, what I love and bring. That's something actors must bring. That you beg for as a director is you don't have to. I know you want to say the lines just the way they're written, and you should, but it doesn't mean you can't play something else. It doesn't mean you can't play an immaturity. It doesn't mean you can't play greed and qualities that are not attractive with the dialogue that's there. Show the writers what you can do. And I continually added elements of the psychological to characters and would play things against the writing, and if it felt, or throw things away or find ways to do it that seemed to be part of Elliot's immaturity. And in that I inspired the writers when they would look at dailies, and we'd watch dailies together and eat together, and writers would say, oh, Timmy can play that, and then you'd see that make its way into a script. I try to say to these actors on TV shows, please show the writers what you can do. Don't just do what they wrote and then go home. Do what they wrote, but also bring a sense of humanity to it. Why are you, All
right, so hold on. Let's go with what you're saying here. So you direct a lot of TV now, and so a lot of it is like these network shows that are very different from something like 30-something, I'd say, right? So when you go into them, are you thinking, how do you approach the TV shows that you're in now? Let's name some of them. So
well, let's talk. There's 2 different versions. One would be The Fosters, where I created the pilot and the next episode, where I directed the ensemble in private rehearsals, where I set the look. How does a show make it 100 episodes? I'm there from the beginning. I'm talking to these characters about how to not act, how to trust and do as little as possible, and how to make the characters last 100 episodes. How do you make these people last for 100?
So you're doing that in like the script, the story arcs, and in the actors?
I'm doing it primarily with the acting. The script and the story, I may go do them, and the sets that won't run out of where's a better school set, not Simi Valley, but let's go to San Diego. We're a San Diego show, let's go to the water. Let's figure out this. How can we be interesting for 100 episodes? When I join a show, that's already been done. I only get that script in that episode. But I will go to and see a performance that plays, yes, Dick is saying da-da-da-da-da, and Jane is saying da-da-da-da-da, and that is the scene. But wouldn't it be better, maybe, possibly, is there value in, which would the way I'd probably preface the note, is there value in Dick not wanting to open up about this? Pay a price for it. Don't be so forthright in the beginning of the scene. Wait till late in the scene. Show us how people like to deflect, how people avoid conflict. Let's see how people avoid confrontation. Rather than, I know you want to attack her right away, let's see you try to avoid that moment. And in that, bring the audience closer. Let's show people how we are, how people are.
So, how do you do that? Like, you read the script and then you talk to the actors before you start filming? Or do you start shooting scenes and then give suggestions, let's try it this way?
On a TV show, you really never talk to the actors before they start filming because they're filming another episode. They're filming the episode before. The best thing to do is on the day and when you're prepping it. Let's say there's a moment that happens where some really important information happens late in the scene. When that happens, you're going to be in a tight close-up, and you're probably going to want to push. This is a big bit of information. You're going to want to lay down some dolly track, and you're going to want the camera to grow into a nice tight close-up, and with music, because that's the moment that's going to happen. You have to, and then you look at it as a director, and your thought should be, I would think, how to earn that moment the best way possible so it lands in the best way. So you will ask the actors to stay moving. Come in, drop your bag, go pour yourself a drink, get a beer, go get a pretzel, go throw the dishes in the dishwasher. Then when the husband says, are you having an affair? And you turn to look at him, now we'll push in on you. But if you play all that from the beginning, and I'm in close-ups from the beginning, I'm not bringing the audience to the moment of value. And how can we earn that moment of value? And actors often will see in their homework the value of a dramatic moment, and they'll want to play the whole scene dramatically. They'll say, oh, this is really great. And so they're crying from the beginning. Or an actor will want to cry in a scene where something is very dramatic and that the tears are coming. And then you kind of have to go in and say, I know your instincts are to cry, but the audience won't cry if you cry. How can you get them to the edge of, can you get yourself to the edge of tears and let them finish it? Because I don't think the writer has written it for you to cry. I think the writer's written this moment for the audience to cry.
That's so interesting, yes.
And how best to do that so they're more affected. The actors will be thinking, okay, here's a crying scene. And they have to go in and let them get it out. As a director, yeah, sure, I see that. I'm going to let you get that out. But then I'm going to go in after you've gotten it out, and we're going to figure out how to get it. A good example of that was I was directing a Joan of Arcadia, and Mary Steenburgen was played the mom, and there's a scene where a boy's mom had committed suicide, and she wrote him a letter, and he never read the letter, the suicide note. And so Joan brings it to her mom and says, this is the letter, will you read it? And Mary saw that this was this big emotional moment. She knew what she wanted to play. And she got there and she was just dry. And we got there in the wide shot, and I'd said, wait. And she didn't get there. And in the medium, we went in medium, and I was like, I'd go in and softly say, you can let yourself go whenever you want. We're in there now. And the next take, and she couldn't get to the tears. And sort of the next take, she couldn't get to the tears. And I realized that was pressure. She was pressurized, and she needed some outside kind of stimulant. And it wasn't a note. It wasn't me going in and saying, cry now. because that's only going to make it worse. So I remember a Marcia Norman play where I always was moved by a brilliance in her writing. And, you know, I'll probably get it wrong now, but I went in and I said, you know, real quietly, and the cameras were, I told them, go ahead and roll, and quietly, and I didn't yell anything, and I went to Mary and I said, do you know Marcia Norman? She goes, yeah, Marcia Norman, you know, Night Mother and Getting Out. And I said, yeah. I said, you know, she wrote a really cool thing in a play one time. I remember reading one of her plays, and a woman had lost her husband, and she was devastated and lost. And then she realized there was a beach ball in the closet, and it had his breath in it. And I looked at her, and I started to well a little bit, and she started to well, and I backed up, and we rolled camera, and boom, boom. And it ended up being an episode that got the show nominated, their screener episode, for the Emmy. It was one of the 2 episodes. And that is a moment as a director, you have to understand where the actors are. You have to understand when they're lost, when they're trying too hard, or when they're pushing. And they want desperately to do the best job, but what is the best way to manufacture that performance? And sometimes it can be psychological, and sometimes it just might be a little trick, you know, that gets them there. But your job is to get them there.
Right. So you're very I think gentle and comforting in your direction, it sounds like. So it probably works pretty well, and they're open to it. But I would imagine that not everybody, and you're saying that everybody wants to be able to deliver that performance, but at the same time, I would think it's kind of sensitive also for some people, especially with egos.
It's very difficult, and you want the actors, the last thing you want to do, and I said, ask a baseball manager, Art Howe. I asked him one time in a Los Angeles when we had the Hollywood All-Stars, or the All-Star night at Dodger Stadium, where we'd all play games with a bunch of other actors. And I sat next to Art Howe and I said, what do you say? He was a great legendary baseball manager with the Houston Astros. And I said, what do you say to a baseball player who's making $10 million a year and has a hitch in their swing, a technical thing that you are aware of at the most fundamental amateur level, and yet they're making fundamental mistakes? How do you approach those mistakes? And he said, well, the first thing you want to do is not embarrass them. And actors are very much similar in the same way, unless it's fun, tongue-in-cheek stuff. Like on Designated Survivor, Italia Ricci was struggling with one of these procedural lines. And I was able to go in and say, great, let's go again. Terrific, you guys, don't be afraid to let it tumble. Don't let it be line. And on the way out, I said to her, in that FBI line, almost believable. And she laughed like you laughed, and every actor in the room laughed, because it's totally the wrong thing to say. But I said it with such support that it gave her the note and took the edge off the fact that she hadn't been able to do it in 4 or 5 tries, because it was one of those lines, like I had a line on Trapper John MD was, patient Sakipnik with a non-productive cough just came off corticosteroids, could be pneumocystis. Those are lines that are really hard to memorize and learn. And she had one of those, FBI wanted this and that, and you have to help them get there. And you can't move on until they get it. And the actor's kind of hoping that you'll say it's okay and move on, but they know they haven't quite got there. So in that case, you can kind of embarrass them a little bit, but you know it's coming from a fun place, and it helps them.
Yeah, you have to know who the person is, and if they trust in that way too. And they. There
were times with Glenn Close on Damages where I couldn't. You know, if you had a note, and if you felt Glenn needed to be simpler, let's say, if you were pushing on her with the camera and Glenn was playing into an act out, or leaning in, or knitting her brow, or doing something that was helping, and the camera was pushing, you might need to go talk to Rose Byrne first and make her laugh, and then go to somebody else and make them laugh. And then on the way out of the room, there was Glenn going, aren't you going to come give me something? And then you move in and say, yeah, when I'm pushing, so stop acting. And then she'd say, get out of here. But you knew that you had her back. She knew that. But if you go to her first, she's a Hall of Famer in the room, right? She's probably one of the top 5 female actresses of all time. And you can't go to her first, otherwise she might back up when she knows there's other performances in the room that are, albeit strong, would be also worthy of notes. but they're doing it right. It's Glenn that's kind of not nailing a particular moment, and when to give her a note on a procedural. In the feature film world, I'm sure Glenn, 1 or 2 takes is all she needs to be the genius she is. But when you're doing a TV show and you have a brand new episode and she's doing legalese for a page of stuff that isn't indigenous to her life, she's not a lawyer, it's not natural, it's not relationship driven, you have to give her 4 takes before you give her a note. A lot of directors and producers will be going, she didn't do it right. And you have to say, I'm not going to wait in there. She knows she didn't do it right. Give her another shot and give her another shot. And then they sit and go, oh my goodness, it's getting better every time. And the actor knows. The actor knows when it's not good. The actor knows right away generally when it's not good.
So much psychology.
It's all psychology.
Yeah.
And we're sharing people's lives and what people are all about.
Yeah, and you're also, you are empathic too. You can feel what everybody else is feeling. So it's also part of being an actor too, right? But as a director, it's useful.
It's really helpful. I mean, the directors who don't, I always admire the directors who knew to do that early, like Spielberg. The Hall of Famers, Scorsese, guys that weren't actors of 100 gazillion episodes. Clint Eastwood, 7 years on Rawhide, 150 episodes as a TV actor before he did a movie. You understand where he learned the process. I don't know where Spielberg learned all he knows. I don't know where Fincher learned. I don't know where Soderbergh learned with their features, and yet they're our best, and they seem to have it early on. It took me a lot of plays and a lot of television to feel comfortable talking to actors, and I'm still not those guys. So.
Who's an actor you've worked with who you felt a little intimidated by?
Well, Glenn was really difficult. Glenn Close was like, directing Glenn, I would say at one point was like having gastric bypass surgery where they make your stomach really small and then eating a burrito. It would be like
really
it was just I could feel my esophagus just locked up, and you're thinking, okay,
I can't imagine.
Because you don't. All you really want to do is get her to where she's her best and great, and nothing on her end. She would, you're in her room at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7, and she's talking, what do you want to do today? What are we doing? Those feature actors, the movie actors, are the best with directors because they work with the best directors.
Right, because the directors normally, right, in movies are totally different. They're much more hands-on. They're more of the whole storytelling, right?
It's all their job. It's everything from the crew to it no longer is the control of a theater or even a TV show where it's all set up and running. The director has to supervise every moving piece. Everybody on the crew, the color of the movie, the shaping of the blocking, the sound, the music, all of that stuff comes back to the director. So there's a certain amount of giving the ball off to that director, which is feature films. And Brad Whitford had said to me, my friend Brad was in The Post, and I said, give me a Spielberg story. And he said, I asked him why he didn't do read-throughs and why he didn't rehearse. And Spielberg's answer was, I don't want to give the illusion of democracy. It's his movie. He doesn't want a lot of people. He knows that the movie will work best if he is on top of it.
Mm-hmm. It's his vision.
It's his vision. And Kevin Costner, when we were back in Field of Dreams a couple of years ago, had said to me that, we were talking with Costas and we were doing an interview, and he'd said to me, every movie that he's ever done that was good was because it had a strong director. And it's really important. And the ones that don't quite work are when the director knuckles under to the studio or doesn't push back. And Field of Dreams, incredibly strong. Phil Robinson, it was his vision. Larry Gordon protected it. And Chuck Gordon, the producer, brothers, protected it. And Phil Robinson was allowed to make his own movie, and that's how you get a classic. Yeah. Jeff Canoe in Revenge of the Nerds, for whatever people would think about that movie, it sticks around today because it was strongly directed. It was Jeff's vision. Right down to Jeff, one of our greatest composers ever, Thomas Newman's first movie, he let a lot of his music go for needle drops, for songs. And here was one of our great composers, Thomas Newman.
He's part of the Newman family with all of the composers.
Yeah, that family. It was his first movie. His dad was Alfred Newman.
And Randy Newman is
Randy Newman's a cousin. Lionel Newman was an uncle. That was Jeff's decision, and it worked incredibly well, and it helped launch Interscope Music.
So, This Is Us. You directed an episode?
I did.
Which one?
I directed season 1, episode, I think it might have been 11, I'm not sure what number it was, but the episode where they're rehearsing a play and they get lost, where Sterling finds out that the dad doesn't want to continue his chemo, where
he's in a play on his opening
Christy
night.
He proposes to her in the hospital when he has a heart attack.
Oh, so it's after he had a heart attack?
After he has the heart attack and the heart thing and
Wait,
crashes.
who are we talking about again? What's his name again? I'm forgetting. For anybody listening, wondering who are you talking about? Everybody watches This Is Us.
You look at the characters.
I know. That's what I'm saying. What's the character's name? It's Kate and her fiance, who's now her husband. How are we blanking out on this?
You're gonna bust me.
Oh.
Don't put this in the podcast. You're gonna ruin my career with these guys.
Toby.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to go for the character's name. But yeah, Toby. Those guys are so great together. It was great working with Ken Olin.
Right, so Ken Olin is of course with Michael Stedman on, as we were talking about before, on 30-something. So he is one of the executive producers on the show?
He's the director producer on the show, the executive producer, yeah. Kenny, and he hired me for that, and I thought I did a nice job, and I hope I go back.
Yeah. They were
I'll never go back if I don't remember their character's name.
Yeah, well, we better make sure that who's that?
It doesn't matter.
Toby?
You put whatever you want. It's your show.
So who do you hang out with now? What's your life like? So you split your time, Michigan and New York, and you must obviously go to LA plenty.
I hang out with my wife and then the people I'm working with when I'm working with them, for the most part. Like if I'm working on This Is Us, then I'm hanging with Kenny and Patty.
So you're hanging with them in the off hours, you mean?
In the off hours, yeah. That's what we do.
Doing what?
Go eat. You go eat or hang out, or it's mostly meals if you're busy.
Oh, that would be so weird. I would have to think for anybody in a restaurant who sees in the booth next to them is...
It is, and when we're all together...
The three of you?
When we were out there, we had Horton and Patty and me and Melissa at the meal, and it can be, you can see people going, wait a minute. That's too awkward, yeah.
What do they do?
Well, they look, they watch, you can just see them looking. But they're mostly our age, right? So people our age, when we were in our 30s, they would have been they might have screamed and gone, oh my God, and it would have been a big deal. When you're in your 30s and your 20s, that's how people react. Our fans are mostly in their 50s now, so they'll smile and nod and know better. They're too mature to kind of make a fool of themselves.
They're not taking pictures without you noticing or anything like that?
Nowadays, yeah, they are. When you first start getting recognized, your first reaction is, oh, you recognize me? And then inevitably your next reaction is, you don't recognize me. And then your reaction is, oh shit, they recognize me. And then you end up with, huh, what? And I remember eating here at Orso, and my daughter was next to me, and she goes, oh my God, Dad, Simon and Garfunkel are over there and they're talking about you. And I looked over and I saw them and I smiled. And they smiled and waved back. And I went back to the food and they noticed it. She noticed it. And I was incredibly happy that Simon and Garfunkel noticed me. But 20 years of people noticing me every single time I go out of the house, and I don't notice it anymore. I don't notice it when I walk into a restaurant that heads are turning, because I went through the don't you recognize me phase and came out of it to what? And that's where most people end up. The ones who want to make a deal out of it are probably really insecure and feel they need to feel important. So they'll manufacture, oh, look at them, they're staring at me, or oh, they're looking at me, or I don't want that to bother me, and it never really becomes a thing. If you're in the Twilight series and there's press chasing you, that's completely different. But if there's no reporters chasing you and people aren't running up to you on the street, it's pretty non-eventful if you want it to be.
You sound very grounded. Very.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I that's nice to say. I would hope that I would I think I'm a little bit grounded, yeah.
I think also you reflect that in your acting as well, right? When I see you on this show or that show, you seem like a real person, right? And I think that has something to do with it.
I think you want to be that. I think we have a lot of power in this medium over people, and you can show them lesser and better sides of themselves. Somebody said to me in an interview, I play a therapist on Designated Survivor, and I really love Keith Eisner had written the episode and did a great job. And as the therapist, I could not be moved, or I could be moved. I didn't care whether it was the president. I didn't care whether my patient was the president of the United States. So the way I spoke to him and the questions and the directness in which I dealt with him was from a doctor's point of view. And the doctor could not do his job if he felt like he was talking to the president and not a patient, as a patient. And he wrote it beautifully. And, Kirkman, the character that Kiefer Sutherland plays, he didn't like it. Kirkman didn't like that somebody would say to him, here's what's going on, or ask him questions that were point blank about his personal life, as if he could have done things better. And I really
it was about his wife, right?
About his wife, yeah. And dealing with a grief counselor, primarily a grief therapist that's going to help somebody through the death and a rapid death. I mean, one of those accidental deaths where your life turns upside down, and you really have no time to prepare for it. And the grief comes hard and heavy. And it was really great the way they wrote it, Keith, and I really loved playing. And Kiefer is so low key that to have a performance that had to be more low key than his low key. To say I'm going to undercut.
So super low.
You're really low key, and I'm going to go even more low key because I can't be intimidated by your position, and I don't care. I can't care and do my job at the same time.
Well, from a former therapist, nicely done.
Hey, thanks.
So ready for some therapy type questions?
Sure.
Okay. What's your biggest flaw?
What's my biggest flaw? That's a really good question, because I immediately in my mind, for me, if it was like quick answer, impatience. And yet it's probably my greatest attribute, patience. So, they kind of go together. I'm very patient with actors on the first and second takes, and then I go get what I need by letting them get it out. I want the next job. I want to create something today. I want to find a better way to do things for arts for kids. I want it now. At the same time, I know patience. It'll happen. Its time is really important. So, I have a drinking problem. I have a problem drinking. Give me one drink, I'm going to want a bunch, and then I'm going to say and do things that are embarrassing to me, that I'm mortified over.
So it's that one drink.
One, and then will come more drinks, and then, I'm apologizing to everybody I know the next day.
So what do you do? Do you stop yourself from drinking mostly?
If I'm not gonna, there's days and days that'll go by where I won't drink. And then if I have a drink, I better just be with my wife.
Because you have it, it's in your family, alcoholism.
It's a problem.
So do you worry about it?
It's a problem. At 60, I'm starting to worry about it. At 60, I'm starting to say, why? Why do it at all? And it's a problem. If you're gonna, and it's tough. I have trouble doing just one. Mm-hmm. I can go with, I have no problem doing none. That is not a problem. I can not drink on a daily basis. But once I start, and I think it's in the genes, and it's tough. That's probably my most difficult physical flaw, which then in turn creates suffering for me. Mm-hmm. I say things that I shouldn't have said or behave in ways that I shouldn't have behaved, and I regret because they weren't from a balanced place. Despite the impatience, I'm not tremendously ambitious, but I counter that with just enough ambition to get myself off the mat and do things. There's certain things I want to see done, and that I work on that are exciting. But I could go to movies all day and and lay around and watch TV with my wife, and that would be the most fun. So
I'm surprised to hear you say you're not ambitious. I would have never expected that because you work so much. Like I feel as though every time I'm turning on the TV, your name pops up in the credits.
You know, that I'm very fortunate that I've been a part of enough shows where now they're like, get the old guy in here. He'll tell us a story or two.
But you can see, even just what we talked about today, like there's so many shows and people that you've had experiences with. It's a high quantity and quality.
I think it has more to do with what desires are fundamentally important to ambition. Ambition is fueled by often desire. I want end result driven. Ambition is often driven by end result. And I don't believe so much in end result. I believe in day to day. I believe in karma. I believe in reincarnation. I believe in the tortoise is slow and steady wins the race.
Who knows you best?
Probably my brother Buck.
Who are you at your core?
Somebody who would rather laugh than doesn't suffer a lot, doesn't roller coaster a lot, believes that I'm here in this lifetime to serve and to love and to give and to lead, versus make an impression, for lifetimes to come, or lost, I mean, I could, in truth, everything I have in my life could go away today, and I'd probably be okay because I have a relationship with God. And I would, if everything in my world turned upside down, I'd head to India, and I would probably spend the rest of my life in some blissful place, helping, taking care of the poor, and realize that was infinitely more important than anything else. That the game of what I do is great, but it's just what I'm connected to in this lifetime. And nobody really knows that. I never talked to anybody about what I just talked to you about. I never talked to anybody about reincarnation, and nobody knows that I have a relationship with God going back to, the mid-70s.
Wait, nobody?
Well, the family might know, a couple people, but it's not anything I tell anybody about. It's not, I don't think that's my job. It's not my job to tell other people or convert other people or...
Yeah, but just talking about it doesn't mean you're trying to convert somebody else.
I just don't. It's very personal. It's between me and God, and it's my personal relationship. And that's at the front of everything with me. That's the most important element of who I am. And I'm also a carny. So my life is a roller coaster of decisions, and good and bad.
Tim, thank you for being on Really Famous. How was it, okay?
It was great.
Tim Busfield, you've worked with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to throw some names out. You just react.
Okay.
Ken Olin.
Funny.
Aaron Sorkin.
Brilliant.
Patricia Wettig.
Sweet.
Allison Janney.
Brilliant, funny, sweet.
Trapper John MD. Who's the star of that?
Pernell Roberts. Entitled.
Anthony Edwards.
Integrity.
Michael J. Fox.
Bravery.
Bradley Whitford.
Funny.
Melissa Gilbert.
Beloved.
That was Tim Busfield. Catch Designated Survivor Wednesday nights on ABC. Thanks again to our sponsor, the Oasis at Death Valley. Go book a trip. Check out where Star Wars was filmed. Who's coming up next on Really Famous? I'll give you a hint. Back in February, he was on TV like every night for a couple of weeks. Another guest is on TV practically every day now, and he has been for many, many years. Shout out to all of you who've been in touch on social media, leaving me reviews on Apple Podcasts, and making me feel just all around super happy and good about Really Famous. I am so appreciative. I'm Cara Mayer Robinson. I will talk to you very soon again on Really Famous.
I just finished talking to Kara on Really Famous, and I had the best time. I could talk to her for a living. She's smart, she's interesting, the questions are great, and I think I revealed too much.
Perfect. The only thing is I forgot to tell you to say your name first.
Okay, all right, good. All right, no
This
problem.
is terrible.
Let's do
It's a double
Let's
take.
do it.
You
Let's
don't.
do it.
You wouldn't want that.
Go,
Okay.
go.
Okay, go.
Hi, Tim Busfield here. I was just on Really Famous. Kara is a fantastic interview. She's super smart. She got me to say things I really shouldn't have said, but I feel really comfortable with her because she's so great. She's like therapist smart. She must have been a therapist before, and she's really understands where we come from as people. I was really honored to be a part of her show. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you, Tim.